I think the problem for a lot of people is that social greed. I remember exactly the spot. I was walking when I was a student, walking with your father and a former student of his. And your father just had taken a shirt or whatever around his head. He didn't find a hat or something, just took a shirt around his head. And of course that's not like in line with social convention. And that student commented on that, well, that's a nice hat, like ironically. And your father then said something like, well, look at you, behaving properly. How have you guys fared? Following the conventions of being nice, not doing anything that is out of line. Mm-hmm. And certainly a bit later in that same day, that walk, that other student just suddenly turned his back to us and just left. There was something there about, having this awe for social conventions first, before the craft, before the talent, before what he was going to do as a painter.
Yeah, but in relation to this story by Gogol, it's not only to follow social conventions, it's a lot about envy, yes, which comes with it, you could say.
Yeah.
But that's not something, you're supposed to follow social conventions and at the same time not feel envy and fall for all these other, lusts and so on. But that comes naturally with following the social conventions, I think.
Yeah, it's a difference between, not going around farting everywhere. That's then you're respecting social conventions. That's the one thing. But when you are such a slave to it that you will do anything that the social conventions tell you, that's when you get a problem. I think that's I wrote down this one sentence here. I think, to me at least, this is like a major or central sentence in the short story. Why do I worry and toil like a learner over the alphabet when I might shine as brightly as the rest and have money too like them?
Yeah, but maybe we should summarize the story. So this is a short story by Gogol called The Mysterious Portrait, and he wrote it in 1835, I believe, or it was published then. And it's about a young painter. His name is Tchartkoff, or formerly Andrei Petrovich. And the story opens with him going to this little picture shop where they have all kinds of dusty old pictures of I think it describes as blood red sunsets and very simple portraits, painted in a very simple manner, or what we would normally call low kitsch, I suppose. And this shop owner is he's really a salesman. He's already packing up pictures for him, yes, without him having asked him to do so. And he's asking, what's your address? Wait. Yeah. And then he feels this young painter, Tchartkoff, is a poor painter, but he feels some kind of pressure to buy something. And so he's looking around and picking up paintings that are just lying on the floor. It's a mess. And then suddenly he comes across this strange portrait. And I think it's a fairly big portrait of a man in an Asiatic robe with these intense looking eyes that are staring at you, so you feel uncomfortable. And also some others in the store, when he brushes off all the dust from the face, some of the other customers in the store, they step back a little, shocked by this expression.
They're looking at you.
Yeah. And Gogol describes it as that the painting was unfinished, but the eyes were very present. So it got this. It's a little bit like Russian icons with this inverse perspective that makes the eyes really stand out. So you get this intense expression. And so he buys this painting for a small amount of money. He knows that this salesman is desperate.
Yeah, indeed.
And he takes it with him home. And there his little servant boy, Nikita, who is mixing the colors for him and so on. He tells him that the landowner, the landlord, is expecting him to pay his rent, and that he will come with the police the next day to kick him out if he won't pay the rent. And Tchartkoff has no money left. He used that on the painting. And so he goes to sleep with these worries. But he's looking at the when he goes to sleep. He involuntarily looks at the eyes, because he put this portrait in the corner. But the man keeps staring at him even when he's sleeping, and it's very uncomfortable to him. And so suddenly, that man in the portrait, he comes out of the picture. With a bag of money, 1,000 gold ducats, I think it is. And he visits Tchartkoff several times in the night, or he has some strange experiences with the portrait during the night, and when he wakes up, he's not sure whether it was a dream or not. And then the police comes knocking at the door with the landlord. And at first the policeman is behaving much better than the landlord. Yes. And he actually takes interest in Tchartkoff's work. Should mention that his studio is a mess, and that it's also described, I think, at one of the first pages. Young Tchartkoff was an artist of talent which promised great things. His work gave evidence of observation, thought, and a strong inclination to approach nearer to nature. Yeah. And so it's a mess everywhere, and he has been painting his servant boy a lot, which is looked down upon, because if you really are a painter, you should get proper models or something, and
it's not
paint high society portraits. But this policeman, he takes interest in his paintings and is looking around, and he comes to study this portrait of this man in the Asiatic robe, and accidentally he damages the frame, and then a bag of money, 1,000 gold ducats, fall on the floor. And Tchartkoff runs to pick up the money
in the blue wrapping, exactly like in the dream.
Yeah, that's right. And Tchartkoff runs to pick up the money before his landlord does, and the policeman is a bit surprised. Oh, you have money? Why didn't you pay him already? And Tchartkoff says that he will pay, and he will leave that apartment, and from there he gets a new studio space at the, what is it called?
Nevsky Prospect.
The Nevsky Prospect is like the finest place in St. Petersburg, very, very central. And he gets
without negotiating the price. Just take it.
Yeah, but he also says, now I have money for 3 years to be undisturbed. He says, undisturbed.
He can work.
Yeah, and that's what he has been trying to do all the time, without any money. But now he actually can do it. And what does he do? He becomes a high society portrait painter. But it should be mentioned that he starts paying. He starts getting fine new clothes, and he goes to fine restaurants, and he even pays the news some newspaper to write good reviews.
Yeah.
So he can get commissions. And suddenly everyone comes to Tchartkoff because the journalist, the bribed journalist, writes that he's a wonder that we haven't seen in a long time.
It's interesting how it reminds me of the whole social media sickness about getting likes, because when he's paid that journalist to write that review, and then he just relishes reading about him, the great Tchartkoff. Everyone should go to him. There's no one else in St. Petersburg now that could paint the beauty as she would want to be painted.
And doesn't it say something like that he makes Raphael look old or something? I don't remember.
There's something about that too, because it's...
and then he feels very flattered.
Yeah.
Because he has had those tendencies to... You know, it's said earlier that the professor expected a lot of him. He was a great talent, but he had some inclinations to party
foppishness.
Or
I learned that word. That means that you're a dandy.
Okay.
Yeah. Nice handkerchief and or what do you call it?
And it's also described that he admired Raphael, and he always stopped at the portraits and paintings of Titian, and that he admired Guido Reni.
Yeah.
Those were the most famous painters at Gogol's time.
Yeah.
You know. And then it says, but unlike his teacher, he did not believe that the old master's technique was, what did he say?
Hidden from you, or
something like that. And that he believed that the 19th century painters had improved upon the old masters, that they had come a step closer to the naturalistic way of representing.
And that is interesting because we're talking about social greed here, and that's a very strange thing. That, you know, when you tipped me on this, I was just mind blown reading it, because this is an exact description of that disease that we have been talking about. Also, when we did the Dark Flame on the Nerdrum students portraying their talent, the same sickness is there. So it's not a question of something specific in our time, but trying to be accepted by society. And when you mentioned this thing about what his teacher has said. You know, you are too impatient. You can, you know, if you fall in love with something, you don't see anything else, and you just go for it, but in a negative way. And it says, and sometimes your color is too strong, and your drawing is weak. So beware. Beware of that. And it's a very strange phenomenon that you have, because he's described, as you said, as a man with talent who is very an acute observer and has some kind of sensitivity. But then there's that social greed that overrides it completely. And especially today. Especially
after he gets the money.
Yes.
And because it says in the beginning, you know, now I have 3 years where I can work undisturbed. And the exact opposite happens, because he comes into all this money. And suddenly he is dependent on that kind of lifestyle, which that money requires in some ways. So he starts taking these commissions, and all these fine and high people in society, they have all kinds of demands. And like it's a little bit like the story about Zeuxis and that woman that ugly woman I want to be portrayed as Aphrodite. All these people come to Tchartkoff, and they want him to achieve the likeness, but at the same time make them way more beautiful than they are, in a kind of manneristic way, not in an elevated way.
And that it should go quick. So at first he has to adjust to it, and it's a bit difficult, but then he doesn't think about it anymore.
Swish swash. He develops this quick way of painting.
Because they are impatient, they have a little time, and they want to have the specific idea of how they should be depicted.
And it's a little bit like if Gogol would have written this story today, he would probably have talked about a person who painted from a photograph. But I think this story is written a few years, or maybe the same year that the photograph was invented.
Strictly speaking, that would be contemporaneous with it. And it's interesting too that you know, when you look at Aristotle, you could look at Nietzsche, you read Gogol, they all warn against naturalism. And you know, what you mentioned, that's the interesting part. He sees that there is something there in these old masters, and it's starting to open to him. But then it's like, oh, but the 19th century is even more naturalistic. And of course the social greed that it has. Those things drive him away from understanding what the old masters are doing. So he's sort of cutting the umbilical cord that connects him with classical painting and reducing himself to a mere naturalist. So it becomes, it's the social greed that is driving him.
And then after many years, he comes to this realization when I think he's invited to. I have it somewhere here. I could read.
He's going to be part of a committee to judge.
Yeah, the committee sends him an invitation to
from the academy, or there's something like that, to judge this work by a new painter who's just really studying in the museums and studying the old masters and being relentless.
Oh yeah, but here I could just read a little bit before that. It says in Gogol's story, Tchartkoff became a fashionable artist in every sense of the word. He began to dine out, to escort ladies to picture galleries, to dress foppishly, and to assert audibly that an artist should belong to society. Home in his studio he carried cleanliness and spotlessness to the last extreme. So that's the devil in him, being totally clean. And it took fashionable pupils, dressed several times a day, curled his hair, practiced various manners of receiving his colors, and busied himself in adorning his person in every conceivable way in order to produce a pleasing impression on the ladies. And he now expressed himself decidedly concerning artists and art, declared that too much credit had been given to the old masters, so now he's going even further than when he was younger, that even Raphael did not always paint well, and that fame attached to many of his works simply by force of tradition, that Michelangelo was a braggart because he could boast only a knowledge of anatomy, that there was no grace about him, and that real brilliancy and power of treatment of coloring were to be looked for in the present century. So it's about a lot of colors, bright colors, I suppose. And there, naturally, the question touched him personally. I do not understand, said he, how others toil and work with difficulty. A man who labors for months over a picture is a dauber, and no artist in my opinion. I don't believe he has any talent. Genius works boldly, rapidly. Here is this portrait which I painted in 2 days. This head in 1 day, this in a few hours, this in little more than an hour. No, I confess I do not recognize as art that which adds line to line. That is handicraft, not art.
Yeah.
So,
and this is 1835.
This is a Hegelian Kantian guy. I don't know what Gogol has read, but it's interesting to see this.
Yeah, I'm thinking about some parallels here, because what happens is the first thing that happens when he gets that first commission, and he just starts to see the brilliance of the skin and all the colors or whatever, and he's really into it. And then the mother's like, "No, why do you paint her like that? You know, it's just not yellow there." But it will help. No, it's just not like that. And then he takes that away and makes the conventional color. So, and then you get all of the others who wants to be portrayed as Mars or whatever they want to be, and he says, okay. So he starts with the social, greed, and then he accepts consciously, explicitly the art rules.
There's a little bit of hesitation in the beginning, but then in the end he's just all in.
Yeah.
And it says here, he painted them now without any great interest in his work.
Yeah.
So it becomes like a Kantian.
Yeah.
Brushing in some sort of a head and giving them to his pupils to finish. His work grew cold and colorless, and he betook himself with indifference to the reproduction of monotonous, well-worn forms.
Yeah. So his work decays and his body decays. It's described how his body starts growing because it's eating so much.
Yeah.
So his god becomes gold, something like that. His god becomes gold, and his body starts to grow.
And then he gets that invitation from the committee to witness a new portrait. A painting which has been made by this Russian painter who's living in Italy. Let me see if I can find the quote here. Ah, yes. So it reads, "One day he found upon his table a note in which the Academy of Painting begged him, as a worthy member of its body, to come and give his opinion upon a new work which had been sent from Italy by a Russian artist who was perfecting himself there. The painter was one of his former comrades who had been possessed with a passion for art from his earliest years, had given himself up to it with his whole soul, estranged himself from his friends and relatives, and had hastened to that wonderful Rome, at whose very name the artist's heart beats wildly and hotly. There he buried himself in his work, from which he permitted nothing to entice him. He visited the galleries unweariedly. He stood for hours at a time before the works of the great masters, seizing and studying their marvelous methods. He never finished anything without revising his impressions several times before these great teachers, and reading in their works silent but eloquent counsels. He gave each impartially his due, appropriating from all only that which was most beautiful, and finally became a pupil of the divine Raphael alone." Well, as a great poet, after reading many works, he read, too, at last made Homer's Iliad his only breviary, having discovered that it contains all one wants, and that there is nothing which is not expressed in it in perfection. And so he brought away from his school the grand conception of creation, the mighty beauty of thought, the high charm of that heavenly brush. And then Tchartkoff comes into this gallery where that painting is hanging, and he sees there's a flock of people flocking around that painting and admiring it in silence. And when he sees it, he gets totally shocked, because he realizes what kind of talent he has betrayed.
Yeah. He how is it? He runs out of the room crying, or like totally beside himself.
Yeah. And then he is asked, because he has become this authority on painting. So everyone asks him what he thinks about the painting, and then he puts on this mask and says,
"There's something to it. We have to admit
there's definitely talent here." And then he hides his tears and runs out of the gallery.
And I think that it comes back. I don't want to hear what you think about this, because in the very beginning, when he sees these eyes, he has this. I don't want to buy anything here, but then sometimes someone has found a masterpiece worth a lot of money.
Yeah. So there's some kind of greed.
So and then he finds this, and then the eyes are looking at him, and it is noticed. You can read it if you want, but it's quote it if you want. It's noticed how he feels discomfort from these eyes. And one thing is that, of course, when you read the rest of it, we might come to it because it has two parts. How this man that was portrayed as a guy who would lend money to people, and is sort of the incarnation of the devil. Mm-hmm. So there's a mysticism or magic.
Let's go back to that.
Yeah, it's a magic to it. But anyways, it's the discomfort that he feels is not only because that man has such presence. I think it is that he sees that this is someone who is more skilled than he is, and that's where that envy and the greed at the same time starts working at him. In the same way as when he sees the portrait by that, or the painting by that colleague of his, and he gets shocked by it, because that is, there are two different tracks. One is the social competition, where the quality doesn't matter, but then there's the quality. And when you are on the social track and you see something that has quality, you know that is the actual standard. Because what you are playing is a game that will perish at some point. When those cliches are not fashionable anymore, you'll lose.
I think most people notice that they notice it unconsciously.
Yeah.
That this is this here is quality.
Yeah.
So he at first he isn't envious. I think he just realizes what he has lost himself, what he has.
When he sees that portrait,
that painting by this Russian painter who's living in Italy, and then he runs back home and he tries to depict a fallen angel, and he wants to reach the same level as that painting he saw in that gallery. But he is unable to.
He just can't.
Yeah, he tries several times, and it's to no avail, because because you cannot instantly reach a high level. That's not how it works.
And it's
maybe in society you can reach a high level of society instantly. That's possible, but not a high level, of painting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then he turns totally mad, and he stops eating, and he starts buying all the best paintings at the auctions, just to tear them apart.
Yeah.
To tear the paintings apart, because he cannot stand anything that is better than himself, I guess.
Yeah. And I think it's an interesting point where Gogol sort of animates what he does. He talks about how the heads that he paints, they will not take an unusual turn or make an unusual movement.
Yeah.
So because
he's so set in this.
It's all convention. It's all stereotypical. It's all masked. It's persona.
And it's ingrained in him.
Yes, he can't. The figures won't move. So of course that's Tchartkoff not being able to make the move, but the way Gogol describes it is that the figures can't move. And that's when he gets, like you say, he goes into this buying craze and destroys all of those paintings. If you want to see the entire segment, head over to caveofapilles.com/subscribe and become a $5 patron today. Watch all our conversations or shuffle through the Cave of Apilles audio playlist by becoming a member today at caveofapilles.com/subscribe.